The radical act of pivoting, how Black women are redefining success through disruption. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm honored to share extraordinary insights from my transformative conversation with Jane Jordan, a visionary force who has fundamentally reimagined what career transitions mean for Black women in America. Jane isn't just leading workshops, she's igniting a revolution through her groundbreaking Champagne and Melanin Prepare and Pivot series. Her work has transcended individual success stories to create a movement that's reshaping entire communities, challenging deep rooted power structures, and redefining what resilience truly means in a world that wasn't built for us. What struck me most about Jane's approach is how she completely shatters conventional wisdom about career pivots. Think about it. When most people hear the word pivot, what comes to mind? Failure, compromise, starting over, a reluctant plan B when plan A falls apart. But what if everything we've been taught about pivoting is fundamentally wrong? What if pivoting isn't a desperate reaction to failure, but actually the most radical act of power available to those systematically pushed to society's margins? This is Jane Jordan's revolutionary insight that for Black women especially, pivoting isn't merely about survival, it's about completely reimagining what's possible when the existing systems consistently undervalue your labor, your brilliance, and your very humanity. Let that sink in for a moment. The very act we've been conditioned to view as defeat might actually be our most powerful weapon. When I asked Jane about this perspective shift, she leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. The system was designed for us to feel like failures when we pivot. That's by design. When we reframe pivoting as power, we're not just changing careers, we're dismantling the psychological warfare waged against Black women's sense of worth. The data makes this psychological warfare painfully clear. In early 2025, over 350,000 Black women were laid off from the workforce, a staggering number representing real human beings suddenly stripped of income, purpose, and the stability they'd worked relentlessly to build. But here's where the story gets fascinating. In the aftermath of this economic devastation, something remarkable happened. These women didn't just accept their circumstances as personal failures. They responded by launching their own businesses at unprecedented rates. They built support networks that transcended individual needs. They flocked to space like Jane's Champagne and Melanin series, where Black women could share strategies, vulnerabilities, and dreams without judgment. One participant, Tasha, arrived at her first Prepare and Pivot session just 2 weeks after being laid off from a tech company where she'd been the only Black woman in leadership. I came in broken, she told Jane. I left realizing that my company hadn't failed me, the entire system had, and that wasn't my burden to carry. 6 months later, Tasha launched a digital platform connecting Black women technologists to mentorship opportunities. She's now employing 7 people, all Black women who experience similar displacement. This isn't just an inspirational anecdote, it's evidence of a profound truth. For Black women, making career pivots isn't a sign of personal inadequacy, but a courageous act of self determination and collective liberation. As Jane powerfully states, pivoting is power. I'll say it again, pivoting is power. When we examine the historical context, this reframing makes perfect sense. Black women have always needed to be adaptable, creative, and resilient in the face of systemic barriers. The ability to pivot, to reassess, redirect, and rebuild has been essential for survival and progress across generations. Our grandmothers and great grandmothers weren't changing careers when they migrated north during the Great Migration or transitioned from domestic work to factory jobs. They were strategically pivoting toward possibility, often bringing entire communities with them. But there's another critical insight Jane emphasized that I want to highlight. You're not alone. The challenges Black women face aren't personal shortcomings, They're systemic by design. The statistics are damning. In August 2025, the unemployment rate for Black women spiked to 6.7%, well above the national average of 4.3%. Mass layoffs, particularly in the federal workforce, disproportionately impacted Black women who simultaneously faced increased barriers due to aggressive rollbacks on diversity initiatives. This isn't about individual failure. This is about deliberate structural inequity. In response to these disparities, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley confronted Federal Reserve Chairman Powell directly, demanding acknowledgement of how monetary policies disproportionately harm Black women. Her advocacy brought national attention to the issue, forcing economic leaders to address racial and gender disparities they'd long ignored. And as Jane told me, when one Black woman stands up, she rarely stands alone. Even when it looks like she's fighting by herself, she's carrying the collective power of all who came before her and creating space for all who will follow. This brings me to Jane's third revolutionary insight: collective action drives transformative change. Our individual pivots, when supported collectively, can shift entire industries and communities. By demanding better opportunities and refusing to accept the status quo, we create pathways for future generations to thrive. Consider this staggering reality. In 2024, startups led by Black women received just 0.4% of all US venture capital funding. Not 4%, 0.4%. This statistic highlights the persistent gap in access to capital that Black women entrepreneurs face, including deliberate bias in investment decisions, exclusion from powerful networks, and systematic erasure from the startup ecosystem. But here's where collective action changes everything. In response to these barriers, Black women formed investment collectives and mentorship circles like Black Women Talk Tech. These weren't just support groups, they were strategic resistance movements. These initiatives have helped Black women entrepreneurs gain access to resources, pitch opportunities, and early stage funding, leading to increased visibility and business growth. One founder, Maya, had been rejected by 72 venture capital firms before connecting with a Black Women Talk Tech funding circle. The same business plan that white male investors called unrealistic was immediately recognized as brilliant by Black women who understood both the market need and my capacity to deliver. She explained her company now employs 23 people and recently secured $3.2 million in second round funding. These aren't isolated success stories, they're evidence of a powerful truth. When Black women support each other's pivots, we don't just change individual trajectories, we begin dismantling the very systems designed to exclude us. Jane's Prepare and Pivot series embodies this collective approach. What began as informal gatherings has grown into a movement helping hundreds of Black women transition into entrepreneurship and new careers. These pivots strengthen entire communities by creating new businesses, jobs, and support systems that operate with different values than the ones that pushed us out. What's particularly revolutionary about this approach is that it recognizes our fundamental interconnectedness. When one Black woman succeeds, she rarely climbs alone. She brings others with her. When one creates a new path, she makes it easier for others to follow without facing the same obstacles she encountered. Jane calls this lifting as we climb, a principle with deep roots in Black women's history of community building and mutual aid. During our conversation, Jane shared a perspective that stopped me in my tracks. When Black women pivot collectively, we're not just changing our individual circumstances, we're challenging the very systems that made pivoting necessary in the first place. This is revolutionary thinking. It transforms what could be seen as a personal setback into a collective movement for justice. It reminds me of Audre Lorde's powerful words: Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. In the same way, pivoting, choosing a new path that honors your worth and potential, is not giving up. It's an act of self preservation and ultimately an act of resistance against systems that never valued you in the first place. So, where do we go from here? How do we transform these insights into action that creates lasting change? First, we must recognize that our challenges are not personal failures, but symptoms of systemic design. This perspective shift is crucial for maintaining our dignity through transitions and directing our energy toward collective solutions rather than self blame. Second, we must build our support networks with strategic intention. We need spaces like Jane's Prepare and Pivot series, where we can connect with others who understand our journey and can offer both emotional support and tangible resources. Finally, and most crucially, we must view our pivots as opportunities to completely rewrite the rules, not just for ourselves, but for those who will come after us. Document your journey, share your strategies, advocate fiercely for systemic changes that will make pivoting less necessary for future generations. I want to leave you with a question that Jane posed at the end of our conversation, a question that has haunted me ever since. What systems would crumble if Black women stopped pivoting around obstacles and started dismantling them instead? Your answer to this question could ignite a transformation far beyond your individual journey. It could help create a world where pivoting becomes a choice made from abundance rather than a necessity born from exclusion. Remember what Jane Jordan has taught us: pivoting isn't failure, it's power. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a revolution that you get to write on your own terms. And you don't have to write it alone. Thank you.